Hello, Doctrinal Summary. This is Professor Marsh, and this is going to be a pretty brief professor video. I'm recording this just after Game 7 of the World Series, so that for those of you who watched it, that was a pretty amazing series and game. I'm very happy for the Cubbies who finally took it after 104 or 108 years, something like that. I'm a big National League fan, so that was a pretty exciting game. Although the Indians did excellent as well. Anyway, so this is going to be a pretty short video, and there's just a couple things I want to make a few remarks regarding your guys' chapters on the Trinity. For the most part, they were all really good. Everybody got my feedback on their individual papers, so if you have any further questions or anything like that, for those of you who haven't emailed me, go ahead and shoot me an email. If there's anything I need to clarify, you can also give me a call. My number's there. You can always text me also. But a couple, just two things, maybe three things. Two things in particular regarding the papers. This actually goes for all of the chapters. I've noticed it's here we are in, what are we in, session 4 or 5? I don't know how many of these we've done so far. And we're still having a problem with several of you of not following the outlines that I'm providing. Now, as I made mention, I think every time, those letters, A, B, C, and D, all those little points don't have to be, written that way. They don't even have to be covered. What needs to be covered are the Roman numerals, the things that are in bold, on the boldface, main headings. Those do have to be covered. And I was a little surprised that this week there was more than a few of you who didn't follow that outline, those main points which need to be covered. And you guys had great material. Some of you went sort of, way far beyond, which was excellent. Unfortunately, it was those very things that need to be covered. So, I made a comment on night 1, our first night in class together. And I made a comment very quickly, I think. But I said, to not be trying to impress impress your professor with all this amazing content. That's excellent if you have great content, but the most impressive thing, at least for me, when I'm reading your papers, are you staying on point? Are you clear? Are you concise? Are you following the page requirement? Are you following the requirements that were given to you? If you can do all that in the limited amount of space you're given, following the directions, that's how I'm impressed. But when you go off sort of on your own things and don't follow the required, things that are required, it kind of hurts having to reduce points for that. I don't want to have to do that, especially when you have great content. But please, when it comes to those outlines, look at those. Make sure you're following those emboldened, the boldface, Roman numeral points, and make sure that those are either your headings or you can rephrase them. But you got to hit on those things. Like specifically, there was actually a couple of you last week that didn't write on the fatherhood of God, which was surprising. So especially when I had it following dispensationalism, there was a reason why those subpoints under fatherhood of God one was in relation to Israel and one was in relation to the church. And there's a reason for that. We just came off of a dispensational chapter which shows a distinction between church and Israel. Now it was to show how God the Father relates to both the church and both Israel. This is the same God. The very first, probably the first, at least the most famous of the earliest heretics was a guy named Marcion. And what he had said was that the God of the Old Testament is not the same as the God of the New Testament. And there was a whole slew of heretics that followed him up to the present day saying that very thing. Well, the main point of that section on the fatherhood of God was to show it is the same God. He does not change. He's the same God in relation to Israel and the same God in relation to church, but there are distinctions of how he relates to both. So there was a reason behind that, and a couple of you missed it. So I made some comments. You do need to have that in there before you return your chapters to me, which, by the way, it's going to be in December. So this is all of these corrections that you make. You don't have to make them right away. I would suggest you do while they're fresh in your mind. But technically, they don't have to be all made until you resubmit everything back to me, which is going to be on one document, and they're going to be 6 chapters at that point. It's going to be in December at the end of this trimester. So all those corrections do need to be made at that point. Also, a few of you didn't hit. This has happened a couple times. The page requirements. Some of you aren't even getting to 8 pages. which is surprising for me because I had a hard time staying within 15 pages when I did mine. And I know some of you in the class actually have a problem staying within 15 pages. It's hard for you, and I can totally relate to that. What's hard for me to relate to is how you can't even get to 8 pages. So some of you were just a page short, some of you were 2 pages short. And not only short on the pages, but on these resource requirements too. There's supposed to be 6 to 8 resources, so you need at least 6, which is nothing, especially with the journals that I'm providing on each session link. I mean, I'm giving you resources right there. So make sure, because I'm going to be reducing points for that. Some of you did get points reduced for that. You have to have at least 8 pages and at least 6 resources per chapter. The way it really should go is, if you're doing the bare minimum, you should have at least 2 footnotes, 2 separate resources per page when you're doing your footnoting. And if you're doing the minimum, that would be, 6 to 8. Well, basically, if you didn't really want to see 8, but if you're doing 8 resources, that comes out to, what is that? 8 times 2 per page, depending on if you're doing an 8-page paper, you're going to have 16 resources at the end. That's sort of a bare, that's a minimum. That's really nothing. But, however, all you need is just a minimum of 6. So I'm going to stop talking about that because I mention that all the time. But you know what I'm saying. So anyway, 6 to 8 minimum resources and a minimum of 8-page chapters. Make sure you guys are hitting that. And one final thing, when you check your emails always, when I say always, you will get an announcement. When I make an announcement, I make sure that it goes to all your emails. So make sure you're checking your emails regularly if I send out an announcement. And on that, when you send me an email, make sure that you're checking for my response, because I'm getting text messages for the Cubs just winning. Some friends of mine. Everybody's excited, at least us National League fans. Where was I? Emails. When you send me an email, like a question you have for me, make sure that you're checking for my response, because I respond pretty quickly. I mean, it's going to be within the same day for sure. Most likely, it'll be within that hour. So I try to respond pretty quickly to give you guys as much help as I can give you. But I've noticed I've responded to some of your emails, and then I don't get a response back or say, another question until 3 or 4 or 5 days later even. And I don't know, that tells me, it's like, are you even checking your emails? I mean, when I respond, I'm responding back promptly. So anyways, if you ask me a question by email, just expect me to get back to you very quick. So always be checking your emails. Okay, that being said, let's move on. This week we have the Doctrine of Christ. And this is an exciting chapter, so I'm hoping that you guys are pretty stoked to have to write on this chapter and the research that I'm sure, are already doing. I know that you guys are already doing, because you're turning in your reading logs. It's Wednesday night right now, so your reading logs are due by tomorrow, so I know I'll see them there. But anyways, Doctrine of Christ. Now, if you look at the main headings again, all those Roman numerals, that's what needs to be covered. The pre-incarnate Christ, the incarnation of Christ, the offices of Christ, the sinlessness of Christ, the death, resurrection, and ascension of Christ, and the post-ascension ministries of Christ. You don't have to, phrase them that way. You can rephrase them any way you want. And again, when you do your table of contents, don't just copy and paste his outline and throw that in there. I shouldn't see the Roman numerals, and I shouldn't see the letters in your table of contents. It should be properly formatted according to Turabian. I'm looking for perfect Turabian. That's the standard. That's why I pick out those little things like the period and commas inside the quote, or you forgot the comma after the end of the ending parentheses in your footnote before the page number. I'm pointing those things out because perfect Turabian is expected. Of course, none of us hit it perfectly, and we get these things pointed out to us, and we fix them. They're easy fixes. But when it comes to your table of contents, it should be perfectly formatted. I shouldn't see any more this outline that I've provided as your table of contents, okay? So pre-incarnate Christ, there's a reason why there's an order, the way that you see this in the Doctrine of Christ, how you're going to be writing. It's very surprising to some. That it's amazing how I'm always just kind of blown away by Christians a lot of times when you talk with them, that their knowledge of Jesus, it goes only as far as the New Testament, never realizing his pre-incarnate ministry. What did he do beforehand? What about the prophecies, in particular about the Messiah? I mean, you got amazing prophecies in Isaiah alone, right? Isaiah 7, talking about the virgin birth. Isaiah 9, verse 4, Jesus is going to be called Mighty Counselor, or Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God. Isaiah 53, it's the most detailed prophecy, detailed not just prophecy, but explanation and the details of the crucifixion, are not even in the New Testament. It's in Isaiah 53. You can go back all the way to Genesis. You can go back to the very chapter of Genesis of God speaking. We have the word right there. Genesis 18. We have these mysterious angels. All the angel of the Lord references. Is that the pre-incarnate Christ? I want to see you right on that. Talk about his eternality. Like for instance, there's a difference between the eternality of Christ and the pre-incarnate Christ. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Christ was pre-incarnate. They have no problems agreeing with that. They just don't go back far enough to it that he's eternal. They'll say that he was a created angel, the archangel Michael, that he existed before the world began. But they wouldn't say that he's eternal. So eternality is an attribute of deity. Only God could be eternal. The incarnation of Christ. Here we have things like the hypostatic union, that he's fully God and truly man in one person. That's what hypostatic union means. There's a union of two hypostases, two natures in one. It's amazing doctrine. We got fully man and fully God. How does that? How do you explain that? What are our passages in the New Testament, Philippians 2 in particular, that talk about it? These are good places to go to. The full deity of Christ we want to be able to talk about. The virgin birth, obviously. The offices of Christ. How does Christ fulfill these classic offices? This goes back to the Reformation that really came out during the Reformation times of the typology of prophet, priest, and king, and how only Jesus fulfills all of them. We have some guys that are prophets and kings, like King David. He was a prophet. He wrote Psalms, and he was also a king. You have some that are just a priest, right? Like Melchizedek. Melchizedek was a king and a priest also. There's another one. That's a whole thing to be able to write on. How Jesus falls in line with the order of Melchizedek and not the Levitical priesthood. But you never see anybody that fulfills all three of these offices. Christ is the only one. So that's why it's on there. The sinlessness of Christ. Here you can talk about the peccability or impeccability of Christ. Meaning, could Christ have sinned? Everybody agrees that he did not sin, but could he? There's many Christians that say, he was fully human. So, of course, he could have, even though he didn't. And yet there are others that say not only did he not sin, but there's no way he even could have sinned. That might be a good topic, might be a good subtopic to write on. It should be, that'd be a very appropriate topic to write on for the sinlessness of Christ. The Bible is very clear. He was without sin. There was no deceit found in him. So that's why it's an important topic to write on. Obviously, the death, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. You got Christ's crucifixion, his resurrection, his ascension. That can be, there are full-blown books written on just that alone. So it's going to be kind of hard to put this all in an 8 to 15-page chapter, I realize, but do your best. And, of course, his post-ascension ministries. This doesn't get talked about a lot. Christ didn't end when he ascended to the Father. What is he doing now? What is his relation over the church now? He's still the head of the church, right? He's the future king of Israel. When we talk about his future ministry, he's going to be reigning in the millennium, right, as king over Israel. Maybe you've never considered this. Jesus is nowhere called the king of the church. He's the head of the church. Yet he is called king in relation to the Davidic covenant, in relation to Israel, all over the place. So that's something to maybe talk about, to write about. But his post-ascension ministry, what is he doing now? He's interceding on behalf of his followers. So there's some topics you can talk about. So anyways, so there you go. You got the outline right there. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, and I will be looking forward to your guys' chapters. All right, you guys. I will be seeing you in Blackboard. God bless. Goodbye. Nope. Now it's goodbye.